Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee. My name is Councillor Wayne Bridges and I'm Chairman of this meeting. Key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. Please note that members of the committee will be using tablets and laptops to view the agenda today. Some quick housekeeping rules. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if one sounds, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. Also, mobile phones to be placed on silent or switched off, and we also have feedback forms available on YouTube underneath the broadcast and also in the room here this evening. We move on to the main agenda, which is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Smallwood, with Councillor Banerjee substituting.
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to Councillor Banerjee this evening. Item 2, declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting. Are there any? I can see no indications. We move on to item 3, which is to receive the minutes of the previous meeting dated 22nd of April 25 and the 8th of May. Can we agree? Thank you very much. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in Part 1. There are no Part 2 items to be considered. So it moves us on to item 5, which is our Heathrow Information Report, pages 11 to 22. And I'm delighted to say we're joined this evening by Becky Coffin and Daniel Caffo from Heathrow. A very warm welcome to you both. So we'll jump straight into it. If you wish to start with your presentation, and that'll be followed by members present this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor, and thank you to the committee for inviting us here this evening. So I'm the Communities and Sustainability Director at Heathrow Airport. My colleague Danielle is a Stakeholder Engagement Manager in our Communities team. So thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you about some of the work we're doing in the borough. We're very proud to call Hillingdon our home, and over recent years I feel we've really strengthened the way in which we're working in partnership with the council, which is very welcomed. We outlined in the report in quite some detail the numerous ways in which we are both working with the council and its residents, and also the way in which we invest in the borough through many of our different ways of working. I just wanted to, draw your attention to three things. I won't cover everything that's in the detailed report. But wanted to highlight some of the partnership working areas where we feel we're making most progress together, the airport's role in local economic growth, and the airport's local impact and what we're doing about that, because we feel all three of those things are important for residents in the borough. In terms of local partnership working, there have been a number of areas where we've really focused over the last 3 years. The first I wanted to pull out was local parking. So we're aware that that's an issue of concern to many residents, and we've heard that feedback from councillors and directly from community members. So at Heathrow we set up a local parking action plan, which is managed through a multi-stakeholder forum that is part of the Heathrow Area Transport Forum. It's a subgroup, a special interest group, and we very much welcome Hillingdon's input to that group alongside a number of other local boroughs, but also industry partners. And what that has focused on is some of those key impact areas like meet and greet parking and also nuisance parking, particularly private hire vehicle drivers. So we've worked closely with the British Parking Association to set up a new scheme for the approval of approved meet and greet operators. We've been working on improvements to our authorised vehicle area, which is an area where private hire vehicles can come and safely and securely wait where they shouldn't be on local streets. And we've also done a lot of work with multiple local boroughs, including Hillingdon, on implementing public space protection orders and control parking zones and the enforcement of those. We've been pleased to support the funding of the successful PSPO that's really made a difference in the Heathrow villages in this borough. The other two areas I wanted to draw out on the partnership side is community investment partnerships. So just over 2 years ago now, we launched a partnership with the council, with London Wildlife Trust and British Airways, and it's the first time we've worked together with any of those partners, so it was great to bring us all together on a project to connect with nature in Hillingdon. So that project is providing some funding, but also some on-the-ground support to a number of the local nature reserves, including Minnock Country Park, Cranford Country Park, Huckabee Meadows, Yeddingbrook Meadows, and others besides. That's created some really great volunteering opportunities, as well as some conservation work that's being delivered in association with the expertise of London Wildlife Trust. And then just this weekend, just gone, perhaps some of you were there, I'm not sure, the picnic in the park at Cowley Recreation Ground. We were very pleased to be asked to sponsor that, and we're delighted to do so. We thought it was a fantastic event. I believe it's the first time. I wasn't there myself, but 3 of my team were, and they sent some fab photos. They loved meeting community members, our Heathrow Rangers, who are the team who go out and do some of the local landscaping projects. They were there and gave away over 750 plants to local families who I think were very keen to go home and take them home and plant them. So that's the first time we've done something like that in Hillingdon, and we really enjoyed it and would love to repeat it. Second point then, just around kind of our role in local economic growth, which we know is very important. 3 things to highlight here. One is, so back in December last year, we announced a 2.3 billion investment in improving the airport's infrastructure. That spend is happening this year and next year, so it's a very significant programme. That's focusing in a few key areas: terminal infrastructure, improving customer experience and punctuality, and importantly, local transport connections and sustainable travel, which I'll come back to in a moment. Then secondly, our Heathrow Local Growth Task Force. So this is a local economic development task force where we bring together stakeholders from the boroughs around the airport, but also local chambers, including the Hillingdon Chamber of Commerce, and local business groups. And that's got several work streams focused on local employment and skills, supply chain opportunities, sustainable transport, and also green growth. And then finally, the Hillingdon Takes Off event. So we're really pleased to be invited. So I came along to speak on the panel at that event. I think it was in February this year. And I think we were really encouraged to see the strong interest from investors and developers and businesses in the economic opportunities in this part of West London. So the connectivity and transport connections for growing businesses in the borough, we're really proud to be part of that and kind of enhancing the offer that makes Hillingdon such an attractive place for businesses today. So we talked a bit there about the kind of our direct contribution to the local economy through jobs, but also supply chain opportunities as well. And then finally, just in terms of local impact, because I think we do fully recognise that for your residents, having an airport on their doorstep, that doesn't come without an impact. And we spend a lot of time through our engagement forums listening to those concerns so that we can take that away. And that's some of the things I've spoken about so far today were triggered from that feedback. But just to highlight a couple of things that we continue to work on in partnership with the council. So I mentioned sustainable travel. So we're particularly working on encouraging the development of new active travel routes within the borough. So we have something called the Heathrow Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. You might not feel that the airport's a particularly easy place to necessarily get to on foot or on a bike, but we're working on improving that. And as part of that, we're kind of linking in with the projects that you've got going on, for example, the Harlington High Street proposed route and the Hillingdon Cycle Strategy. So we will continue to input and work collaboratively with you on those. We know that air quality is something that's been of concern to residents for many years. I mean, actually, I think what we have seen over the last decade is significant improvements in air quality. So if you look at the data, which you can find on Heathrow Airwatch, which is a website we've put together with all of the local authorities around the airport. The data there shows that pollutant levels have decreased between 35 and 39% over the last 10 years, and all of the levels on all of the monitors are now within regulated guidelines, including the Hillingdon monitoring station, which is beside the M4. So that is really significant progress. But we will continue. So, for example, very recently, we've been planning Clean Air Day celebrations. So that takes place on the 19th of June. We'll be piloting a school air quality workshop at Harmondsworth School, for example. So that work continues. And then I think lastly on noise, clearly a very important impact area for residents in the borough. We last year launched a new programme of noise insulation. So that's where we go into residents' homes to fund up to 100% of eligible insulation costs, so to provide acoustic glazing and other products that will reduce noise levels within their homes. So we start off with a free independent survey to identify what's right for that home, and then work with the homeowner to plan that in. We're starting with the zones that are closest to the airport and most impacted, and for example Longford in Hillingdon is one of those. So 454 homes in Longford were eligible to register. Of those, 304 did register, and we've already completed 209 installations. So that programme to continue to offer noise insulation, as well as we do offer noise insulation for schools, vortex protection and home relocation support. All of those are important measures to go alongside our noise action plan, which is how we are continuing to reduce noise impact from activities at the airport. So I'll stop there because I could probably talk for a very long time, but I'm sure you have questions. So just wanted to highlight just some of those areas, and more than happy to discuss any of the issues in the report.
Becky, thank you very much for a very informative presentation. We'll open it to questions from members, and I'll start with Councillor Davis, please.
Right, where do I start? It's great to have you here, thank you. The first one, you spoke about infrastructure and investment. What plans have you put into place after the recent power outage? So that was a massive situation for the south of the borough.
Yep.
I actually witnessed the lights going out from a high level Hillingdon hospital, and it was spectacular to see, but it wasn't when everything was in darkness. So what is the future plans, and what have we got in place to stop this happening again?
Yep. Thank you. So firstly, that was obviously a very difficult day for the borough and for the airport as well. And the first thing to say is, our primary objective is to serve passengers and look after our colleagues safely. So we made the decision to close the airport because of that. The fire, as I'm sure you're aware, was not at the airport. It was at the North Hyde substation. We took the decision to close the airport for the safety of passengers and colleagues, and do just apologise for the disruption to any customers. But actually, I think from our point of view, the recovery of the operation that day was really down to the hard work of the many airport partners who work at the airport. You may be aware that we've recently published the outcome of the Kelly review. So, like you, it was very important to understand the learnings from that event. So, the Kelly review was conducted by Ruth Kelly, who is one of our non-executive directors. So that was an independent review that she conducted, and that assessed our preparedness and scrutinised our response. The evidence that she's produced confirms that we made the right decisions on the day and successfully put safety first. So there were no injuries reported, which was our primary objective. Investments in energy resilience are clearly incredibly important. They were part of our strategy, and they will absolutely continue to be part of our strategy. And our response was effective because we have well-drilled crisis response procedures. So I think the findings of the Kelly review endorse the fact that the right decisions were made on the day, there were plans in place, and they were executed. There clearly are a number of recommendations for us to now act upon. So those recommendations, of which there were sort of 20 or so, they're about further strengthening our resilience for the future, and our team has committed to implement all of those recommendations in full. We'd be happy to share what we've released on that with you so that you can have more detail on what those specifically are, because I don't have those to hand today, but I think that will show that we are improving resilience for the future. I think the other thing to note is just that there are still some outstanding questions for National Grid and for SSEN around the cause of the fire, which has not yet been confirmed, and the final NESO report, which we hope will confirm how the fire could start and why all 3 transformers failed. That is something I believe is expected towards the end of this month.
Councillor Davis, do you have a supplementary?
I do have a second question, yes. We spoke about noise and air quality data that you're capturing. How is that going to work now the Cranford Park agreement has ended? Because from my understanding, that flight paths could change now the Cranford Park agreement. So are you looking further north of the borough? Because it's not to say that you're going to do this, but we could have planes flying in across the Uxbridge Road rather than along the M25. So are you reaching out to them to help insulate their houses, or do you have a plan of where the planes are going to come if they are going to move?
Yes, thank you. So I think you're referring to the changes. So that the Cranford Agreement was something that the government set up many decades ago, as you may be aware, and it dissolved about 13 years ago, and we have applied for planning permission to make the ground infrastructure changes that would enable us to implement alternation, which is would allow kind of takeoff and landing in both directions on both runways. So as part of the application that we have put into the council, we have conducted noise assessments and air quality assessments and modelling. So I think in answer to your question, yes, we have assessed and identified what those impacts would be with those changes, and we have proposed a package of mitigation measures that includes noise insulation for any homes that would be affected by new or increased noise. That is currently being reviewed by the council's planning team, and we will continue that process and engage on what needs to be done. There is already a network of air quality monitors that includes that area, so we will have data on that.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Becky, for joining us this evening. Can I firstly put on the record my thanks for your investment into the Mayor's Picnic in the Park. It's held in my ward. It was held in my ward this year, and it was a fabulous event. And I did see the big sponsored by Heathrow thing near the main stage, and yeah, thank you for your investment in that. What is slightly less great, and kind of what my question is concerning, is the area behind that area, which is Packet Boat Lane, and we have particular problems with parking. So I understand that the beginning of your report, not the report given to us, but what you said in person, you're talking about the LPAC, or the agreement that you have with parking. I understand that you have increased parking charges, but unfortunately, because of these increased parking charges, people now are spreading out further into the borough, including areas like Packet Boat Lane, where they take on huge amounts of private land and park hundreds and hundreds of cars there, right next to a huge lake that's loved by many in the borough. Often these are unregulated car parks, etc. I was just wondering if there's my question was actually around, you said there's a lot of ways that members can communicate and feed back with Heathrow. I imagine a lot of that work's done in where a lot of the problem is, near Heathrow villages. But if you could perhaps share if there's a way as councillors we can get in touch with you to deal with that specifically in those particular sites, because it is spreading, and also a way for I can communicate with my residents to get in touch with yourselves as well, because I understand there's a lot of work done in the near vicinity, but it's becoming a bigger problem right now. If I get a bit of reassurance, basically.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So we really appreciate the feedback. because without that we can't act. So the first thing that I suggest we share is a link to so we have a portal that we set up last year for any residents, and that doesn't matter where they are, to report nuisance parking that they think is connected to the airport. And then so that comes through on a form to us, and our surface access team will review it and kind of look at that. We've used that to identify the hotspots where we think things are happening, and then we use that data either with the council or with the local police, who have a dedicated officer who's working on this with us. And so, if we can get some data on where it's happening and what's happening, we can provide that report. Then secondly, if there are sort of slightly wider issues that maybe aren't specifically parking but might be associated with it, we have a community relations helpline that is available for any issues to be reported to us, and that can be either via email, or there is a helpline that's available during working hours as well to speak to someone. So we'd recommend providing both of those.
Councillor Gohill, just to follow up?
I do. It was a separate question, but actually I've got a follow-up to this, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
And we're quite fortunate we have parking officers here as well to perhaps comment if you can't pick up the entirety of it. From what you just said as an answer, it doesn't strike me as entirely fair on the council's parking officers, who are stretched across the borough, to be focusing a lot on people who sort of dump their cars to go on holiday. I was wondering, part A and B is, partly A is what work is sort of Heathrow doing, aside from with the police as well, to support the council in that, because it is an airport specific problem. And the part B of it was, if you could provide if you have one, perhaps if you could provide a positive or successful example of how that's worked in the past. It doesn't have to be in Cowley, but it could be anywhere down near Heathrow Village, is something where sort of that's led to some success, so we know what routes we can take to build on.
Yeah, thank you. And perhaps, Richard, if you'd like to comment after I've spoken as well, would welcome that. So the first thing to say is, I think we absolutely acknowledge that we have a role to play. I think what we found, not only in Hillingdon but also in Spelthorne and in Slough, is that we have to work in partnership with the council. We need regulations plus the right communication plus enforcement. So firstly, in acknowledgement of the fact that this is an airport-related issue, we are providing funding to enforcement, not only in Hillingdon but in a couple of other boroughs as well. So that is the first thing to say, and we acknowledge that is our responsibility to do so. In terms of sort of specific things that we're doing, so understanding the cause of the parking is important for us to then apply the right solution. So at the moment there are two issues that we've both been working on. So one is the private hire vehicle drivers who might wait in certain areas for periods of time, which causes a nuisance. So with that, our approach has been going out to talk to them. Our rangers have given leaflets to people to say to them, this is the authorised vehicle area, this is where you should be going. We've taken feedback from those vehicle drivers about the authorised vehicle area, and we've made improvements on the back of that, for example, to the welfare facilities. We have been writing to the licensing authorities, asking them to communicate to members that parking in those sorts of areas is unacceptable. But to be honest, the most effective measure so far has been the PSPO. So that has moved on, and I don't know if you have the data with you today. If not, I can find it in my notes. But that has had an impact on more than 1,000 drivers being moved on. And I think the important thing that we've seen in both Stanwell, where it was done, and here, is that you don't get a lot of repeat offenders. So that is being effective. On the illegal parking operations, that is a different problem, and it is challenging because it's connected with other potential kind of crime issues. Our focus then has been, again, working with the council but also reporting that information to the police. But I mentioned the British Parking Association. What we're doing is communicating to passengers to say you should only be using an approved provider, and trying to communicate that very clearly, because I think it's by letting customers know that they shouldn't be giving their business because it's a risk to their cars to those illegal providers, those road providers, then that's how we'll stop it actually happening. So I think we acknowledge it's really complicated, hence why we brought the HATAS SIG group together to address it, and it's taking time, but we think that combination of all the different measures in our parking action plan is what will actually work. Unfortunately, there isn't one single bullet that will do it.
Councillor Gardner?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. About the air quality, depending on the flight path, I mean, where I live on a main road, which has got nothing to do with anything, apart from the petrol fumes. You can almost taste the aviation fuel when when the aircraft are circling presumably to dump whatever they've got. I'm not quite sure, and a lot of people have said that. Is there anything you can do to stop that happening?
So I think I think you're talking about the smell of aviation fuel.
Well, you can almost taste it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the air quality monitoring around the airport shows that the emissions from aircraft don't go very far at all. So any air quality impact around the monitors is all from traffic. So any air quality impact is from road traffic, not from aircraft. Now, I appreciate that's just a scientific point. It doesn't take away from the fact that you might smell it or taste it, but it isn't what's causing any change or the change that is being picked up on any monitors. In terms of aircraft that are held in stacks before they land, so the key to addressing that will be the improvement of airspace modernisation, which, as you may be aware, is a programme the government is in the process of implementing across the UK, where essentially so airspace is the routes for aircraft in the sky. That is being updated and modernised to become more efficient. So through that process, we will see fewer sort of situations where aircraft have to be held and stacked.
Councillor Gardner?
I've got a supplementary.
Yep.
On page 4 or page 16, local environmental schemes. More recently, Heathrow built a bird's hide in the shape of its iconic control tower, allowing visitors to observe bird species coming into land. Why has there been no advertising on that? I mean, I've been around long enough to remember probably when Heathrow was built. So, I mean, a lot of schools used to take the kids up there in the viewing bit and things like that. I just wonder why that hasn't been advertised, because we've got a lot of children that don't have access to outside spaces. So that would be, I mean, that's my thing for the environment. That needs to be publicised.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. That's really helpful. So the bird hide is very new. We only launched it at the very end of April. So it's still there. And we'd be happy to follow up with you outside of here to see if there's an opportunity for schools to be able to visit. So there's the bird hide, but there's also all of our other, so we have 13 biodiversity sites across the airport, and some of them are suitable for school visits. We have a programme of partnerships with some of the local schools, such as Harmondsworth Primary and Heathrow Primary, and William Byrd, but we're happy to look at whether we could facilitate other visits, or we also go in and do workshops and careers engagement sessions in both primary and secondary schools, so we'd be delighted to follow up on that. Thank you.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm going to go back to parking, which is a considerable issue for residents, particularly in the south, but as Councillor Gohill says, it is stretching further and further north. It's just becoming very, very difficult for residents, which means that they're having to look for solutions, or asking the council to look for solutions as to how to tackle this problem. And besides the unauthorised mass car parks that are going on, there are those companies, so-called companies, which take cars and dump them, take them and leave them on the side of the road, and fill up parking spaces and so forth, and that's not good for the owners of those vehicles because they can be easily damaged, etc., etc. I'm wondering whether, well, beyond what you already talked about, what are you doing to tackle these sort of activities that are going on with these entities, and whether or not there's any, you mentioned funding as well, because you'll be aware that if a resident wants to bring in a parking management scheme, they now have to pay for their first vehicle. Have any discussions been had with the council in terms of funding to enable where you've got these things going on to help residents with these fees?
Can I just clarify the question, Councillor? Are you asking if we've been asked to discuss funding for residents who have control parking permits?
If there was any scope to discuss funding to support, because we've got residents that are up in arms over this. They don't want to necessarily pay for it, but they hate the fact that you've got these companies parking cars and leaving them there, and what limited solutions there are, either cost the resident or cost the council.
So we certainly wouldn't rule out discussing anything. Absolutely open, and we've discussed quite a range of options. I think what we're trying to do is get to the source of the problem, because what we want is for those people not to be there causing that impact on residents. So that's where we're focusing our effort, but we'd be happy to discuss other kind of interim solutions as well. So we're certainly open to it. I think the thing we've tried to do is ensure that we're focused in the areas, the priority areas, which are the hot spots. So if your residents are experiencing issues, we really encourage them to report it via the portal that I mentioned, because that's the data we've used to inform our discussions with officers on where to target any support. So it needs to be data and evidence based.
Councillor Farley, your follow-up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, of course, it's based, but it'd be good if you could share that information with us regarding the portal, because
yes.
I am aware that residents are reporting to the council, reporting to the police, reporting to others, whether this is some unified thing. It's obviously the data you get, but it's how that gets passed out to other interested parties. The other thing I wanted to touch on was noise monitoring, because you've spoken about noise in the report, but I live in North Hayes, and I can often hear the engines there. So I'm curious as to how far out your monitoring extends from the airport, because on one level you could say, well, if it's sort of reduced here, then it may have reduced even further out. But I'm curious as to how far your monitoring extends beyond the airport.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have the exact kind of map to hand. That's data we'd be happy to share. We do have a kind of a location map, but it does go out to a number of locations under flight paths, quite a significant distance. So definitely as far as Hayes. Whether there's one in Hayes, I'm not sure. Are you referring to aircraft noise when the aircraft are on the ground or in the air? On the ground. Okay, fine. So I think it's very timely that you mentioned that. So I think we've had feedback from a number of areas in the last sort of 12 months about ground noise, and through our Noise and Airspace Community Forum, which is independently chaired, we've identified that as an action area that needs further work. So we're actually in the process of putting in place some new monitoring for that, so we could have a look at whether that's extending to near the area you describe, and we are working on a set of new actions to address it, because it's an area that I think has not had as much attention as kind of in-flight noise in the past, and we recognise that more is needed.
Councillor Core.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming in to present your report. You mentioned that the partnership is getting better. I wanted to understand, do you think it's reached its optimal point? What are the challenges, and what can both sides do to make it even better?
Thank you. So I think there's always room for improvement, right? I think we're really pleased with the progress on these issues. I think we know there are some, so I think none of us on either side are satisfied with progress on parking, and the feedback we've received today underlines that that's something we need to double down our efforts on and continue to work on. I think there's definitely further scope around our community investment activities. So we have something called a Giving Back programme, which has a number of elements to it. I've mentioned the Rangers, the partnership with London Wildlife Trust, and also our schools partnerships. But we also have something called the Community Takeoff Fund. We're also the major donor to Heathrow Community Trust, which is an independent grant-giving charity, and we give over £600,000 a year to that. We would like to see more charities and community groups in the borough accessing those funds. So anything that members can do to communicate that those opportunities are available through the through Heathrow would be very much welcomed, and we'd be happy to provide some links that could be shared with residents after this. So I think we'd like to see more of our Giving Back programme be directed into the borough, and we would like to continue working, I think, more on local economic development opportunities in particular. So we have something called the Heathrow Skills and Employment Academy, which I think some of you are due to visit later this month. So I think following that visit, we'd be very keen to discuss what more could be done to promote the job opportunities that are available through the Heathrow Academy. You know, the Academy is there to be, I guess, a kind of a gateway, a front door for residents to get their first job or indeed a future job at the airport. And we fully recognise that there are some residents who perhaps at the start of their careers might not necessarily feel that the airport's somewhere they can or have the skills to go and work, but actually we can help them get ready for that through pre-employment training and other things that we offer. So I think we believe there's more opportunity to access there.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned waste management in the report where it says zero waste airport objective. How many tons of waste that you reuse or recycle, and what kind of waste would that be? Do you also normally incinerate everything, or do you do something else to your waste? Thank you.
No, so around 49% of our waste is recycled currently. We want to, that is kind of slowly increasing. We want to get that up to at least sort of 60-70% in the next 5 to 10 years. We're just in the process of reviewing and updating our waste strategy. I don't have the tonnage figure to hand, but again, that's something that we can provide after the meeting. In terms of what is the composition of our waste, it's there's quite a lot of construction waste because there's, with the size of a small city, so there's a lot of construction that happens. So a lot of that material is recyclable materials. We have kind of, I guess, traditional commercial waste through the various catering facilities on the airport and the operation, and a lot of that contains things like plastic, cardboard, etc., that is separated for recycling. The area that is more challenging is the onboard catering waste that comes from the airlines, which, as you may be aware, comes under specific international catering waste guidelines. So there are some quite specific rules around how that can be treated and does have to go for incineration. So, it's quite a complex network. We work closely with airlines and retailers and other partners, but the focus of our waste management strategy will be to do two things: increase recycling, but also, very importantly, reduce total waste overall. So we are kind of working through the waste hierarchy, starting with reduction first.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Prior to this meeting, I was having a look online at business rate valuations, and I'd seen that Heathrow hasn't had one from the London Borough of Hillingdon for a number of years. Would Heathrow be open to a discussion with senior officers and cabinet members so we can ensure that Heathrow's paying their fair share like other businesses within Hillingdon are?
I think so. We do believe we I mean, we are the largest business rates payer in the country, so we do believe we pay a fair share. That's not an area that I'm responsible for, but we'd be happy to arrange a conversation with our property director to discuss it further.
Matt, did you wish to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor, business rates, the valuations are set by the Valuation Office Agency.
Right.
It's a department of the Inland Revenue. There is due to be a revaluation of all business properties across the country from the start of next financial year. It's not within the gift of the council to set the rateable value or the multiplier of properties.
Sorry, Chairman.
If I could intervene, I think what Councillor Davis is referring to is accessing the airport for the valuation commence rather than the actual rates that they're charging.
Yeah, it's more about, I've seen that, I'm assuming with an airport being quite high security, it's not easier for Joe Public to go on site to perform these valuations. I know we don't set the figures, but I know Hillingdon Council, along with other councils, do receive a portion of that.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, if there hasn't been a valuation for a number of years because of ticking boxes, etc., to get on, is that something that we can have a discussion with other councils and other government departments?
I'm sure it's
I
something
understand
we
that's not your remit, but if you could point us in the right direction, and if we could maybe add that to a cabinet officer's agenda or something like that, that would help.
Thank you. Do you wish to have a follow-up at all?
Yeah, why not? Let's talk about the elephant in the room of the Heathrow expansion. From my understanding is that Heathrow wasn't aware of the government's announcement that it was going to be allowed to expand, or they were going to push forward with that. How are you managing with the short notice that you've had to put plans together, etc., and where are we at with that?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for framing the question. So, yeah, as you refer to, at the end of January, the Chancellor made an announcement in which she signalled the government's support for a third runway at Heathrow, and she invited proposals to be brought forward by the summer. We are developing a proposal to respond to that, and we intend to submit it by the summer. It was notable that she invited proposals, so there are obviously, as you may have seen in the media, others who are considering submitting an alternative proposal to that of Heathrow. So we are in the process of reviewing the plans that we had paused in 2020 and considering what to submit to the government. So that means kind of reviewing where things had got to, what has changed since then, and I think importantly, what are the policy changes that would be needed in order to meet the very ambitious timeline that the Chancellor also set out in that speech of consent by the end of this Parliament and aircraft taking off from the runway by the end of the next.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, and sorry to say, but I'm returning to parking.
Okay.
If that's okay. But in this committee, Councillor Bridges quite generously gives us 2 questions. I wanted to ask a third, but I waited until everyone was asked to go back to it, so hence my return to the topic. It didn't quite sit well with me that it's down to Hillingdon Parking Services mostly, and a bit of the police, and ultimately the Hillingdon taxpayer to deal with the issue of parking of vehicles that are left for 1, maybe 2 weeks often in a row as a result of the airport, and it's actually it opened my eyes to see that. Actually, I thought in collaboration, I thought that meant that Heathrow might have given some sort of funding towards it to deal with that issue specifically, off the back of, I don't want to use the E word, but expansion that Councillor Davies brought up. That problem's only going to get worse. With increased capacity, increased parking, increased cars, increased problem. I'm very surprised there's nothing that Heathrow does with it. So I suppose my question is, would you or your team be willing to have a conversation with Heathrow to fairly fund that side of the problem? Because I understand you work with the police also, but I know from abandoned cars within my ward that it takes the police longer than 2 weeks to identify that vehicle. We've seen in the Chancellor's Consumer Spending Review that the police aren't getting any more money, so they don't have resources they can put towards that either, which is it means that who's that burden going to fall to? It's the boroughs. And if a part of that problem is Heathrow, I think I think it's only fair to politely ask if Heathrow can maybe invest a bit within to deal with that specific problem. So I was wondering if you'd be open to a conversation with cabinet members, senior officers who might want to do that.
100% yes. So I'm disappointed that you don't feel that we are committed to taking action on this, because we've worked really hard on this. The parking action plan includes lots of different measures. Enforcement is definitely one of them, and we've responded to the request to support enforcement for the PSPO. We are open to conversations of supporting other kinds of enforcement if that will make a difference to solving the problem. I think we are being guided by what officers and the police feel is, the things that will make a difference, because it's a complex area, and we are a business. It's got to be a balance between what we do and what the authorities do, but we are absolutely not shying away from the problem. We fully accept it, and we will continue to bring whichever stakeholders are needed to the table, including parking companies, the BPA, whoever, to find solutions. So, yes, we'd be more than happy to attend a discussion on that and to look at whether there's additional measures beyond those we've already identified.
Richard?
Oh, sorry,
just the officer just responded first. Yeah.
I may be able to help, thank you. Just to provide some reassurance and follow what Becky said. So for some years, Heathrow have funded the council for additional parking enforcement deployments around Heathrow. That's been going on as long as I've been with the council. And we've recently moved that funding into additional environmental enforcement deployments, which is funded mostly for evenings and mornings by Heathrow now for the Public Spaces Protection Order enforcement. We're keeping this very much under review. We met with James, one of Becky's team, only, I think it was beginning of last week, to take stock of what we're experiencing. We presented some further proposals of the cost that is coming to the council. Additional funding has been agreed for the next few months to support us to put more capacity behind some of the PSPO enforcement. So it's an ongoing conversation we are having, just to back up on.
If I could clarify that my statement wasn't based on that, and to entirely fair to you, Becky, the next agenda item is literally parking in the borough, so we literally have stats in front of us as part of the agenda items and the papers that we've read, and I was going off the base of what you said. I wasn't aware of that. It wasn't in the annual parking report, but thank you for clearing it up, and I'm glad to see you actually are working together, and that's very reassuring on my part, so thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gohel, your supplementary? Okay. Any other members before we wrap it up? Councillor Kaur?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned skills training.
Yes.
And apprenticeships. What's your capacity like for apprenticeships? How short we are in terms of how many more people can come in to that? And also, are you also open to considering work experience opportunities for the graduates and things like that? How can people reach out to you if they want to? Thank you.
Yes. So we offer a number of, so there's a few different apprenticeship schemes. There's an engineering apprenticeship scheme, there's an operational one, and we have a shared apprenticeship scheme, and I've got some data here so that shared apprenticeship scheme is in collaboration with some of the infrastructure and construction partners on the airport. There's 31 Hillingdon residents who are currently being supported through that scheme. That's just Hillingdon. Obviously, there's a lot more beyond that, but there are certainly more opportunities, and they are available every year. So yes to apprenticeships, and then on work experience, we offer lots. So we've so far this year. So actually, sorry, just in Q1 this year, we've done 371 experience of work days, and 429 young people have been reached in Hillingdon. And so, yes, there's absolutely scope to continue that and to do more.
Councillor Cordier? No. Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I ask my question, I just want to say thank you, because you've been really well prepared today. And it's sometimes when we get these sessions, we don't get answers like we've had. So thank you very much. My question is, does Heathrow offer any support around winter to the local area? You've got gritters, I've seen you've got heavy machinery. Do you offer any support to the local roads with gritting, etc.? Is that anything you do, or is that something you could do? Because that could be a massive support when we're in our peak cold season. I know you guys are just as busy during then, but is there anything you could do with that if you don't already?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know, actually, so that is one I can't answer. We will have to take away. You may be aware we have, a lot of very specialist equipment that's specifically for clearing runways and de-icing aircraft, which probably wouldn't be suitable, but we do obviously play a role in maintaining quite a lot of roadways around the airport campus as well. So I don't know, but it's something we'd be happy to take away and have a look at. And if I can just say that part of the reason I'm doing so well in answering your questions is because of my colleague Danielle having done an excellent briefing. So, yes, thank you to Danielle.
Councillor Davis, any follow-ups? Okay. Councillor Farley, and then we'll finish off.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to, you mentioned that the active travel and the sustainable travel. And given Heathrow's boundaries, I'm just curious, you mentioned about the Hillingdon Road, High Street. Could you elaborate a bit more about what the plans are? Because you also mentioned action plan.
Yep.
I don't know if that's a publicly available document or something, or where that could be found, if that could be shared as well. I'd appreciate that, because we know what's actually in there. But I'd like to know a bit more about what this active travel is and the sustainable travel plans you've got are. If you could elaborate on that a bit more, please. Thank you.
So the local, the Heathrow local cycling and walking action plan is publicly available, so that's something we can absolutely share, and that's where we are looking at what are the connecting routes between the airport and the routes that local authorities already have in place. Because what often seems to happen is there might be a really good route through a borough, but there might not be that final connection onto the airport campus. So that's what our action plan is about, trying to fix some of those exits and entries into the airport. So that's what that focuses on. Specifically on the Hillingdon High Street, I don't have any more detail on that. I think our point was that we're aware that that's something the council's looking at, and that we would look to connect with it through our own action plan to ensure that those two fit together. And then in terms of wider sustainable travel, we have something we call the sustainable travel zone, which is the areas kind of closest to the airport with populations that need and want to travel to the airport, particularly for employment. And we subsidise some bus and coach routes to support people getting to work in those areas, including at, for example, early in the morning or late in the day when there might not otherwise be kind of a viable service to support shift workers in particular. So there are a number of routes that we support in all boroughs, including in Hillingdon, and we can provide you a list of the specific bus routes that applies to. The other thing we do through the Sustainable Travel Zone is ask for feedback. So if any members here do have feedback that there are areas within your wards that residents are struggling to get to the airport for employment, then it's useful for us to be aware of that, because we continue to extend those bus routes year on year. So we'd be interested in any recommendations.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. And just again, in terms of the overall action plan, because you mentioned action plan several times. Again, that document I'd be curious to have a look at, so you see what, because obviously there's so much you can put in these documents.
Yes.
And some of it can be a bit more high level, and it's sort of getting into the nitty-gritty. So having that shared with us. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to that, we have a very a lot of expertise in our surface access team, and a colleague who works specifically on bus and coach connections. So we'd be happy to put you in touch with him to look into the detail of any kind of specific bus routes.
Okay, thank you. If I can just add a contribution on my part as well, in terms of transport recommendations or suggestions, it's very heavy on bus routes, which is great to see. I'd just like to bring your attention to canals and towpaths as well, because we have been putting in a lot of investment in those areas as well over the years. We primarily use 106 money from our planning infrastructure projects, but if there's any way that Heathrow could perhaps assist the council in those improvements, that would always be appreciated. And it is a very accessible route, particularly for cyclists using the Grand Union to access employment opportunities at Heathrow. So I just thought I'd put it on your radar. So
yeah, thank you. We'll take that one away to our surface access team.
Thank you. Well, that's all the questions for this evening. I hope that wasn't too intensive for you, but thank you very much for your attendance. It's been a very informative session, and we do welcome this opportunity to work with Heathrow and discuss the pressing issues for our residents. We'd like to see a lot more of it, to be honest, in future, but you're very welcome here this evening, and thank you for your attendance.
And thank you very much for the warm welcome, and we will, as you will note, we've been taking notes, so we do take this away because it's valuable feedback for us on what is important for you and your residents, so thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next item, but you're free to leave if you wish to do so. But, you're more than welcome. It's not a problem. You're one of the few that do, but yes, you're more than welcome. Okay, sorry, let me just get my bearings. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the draft parking annual report, pages 23 to 44, and we have Richard Webb and Freddie Mohammed with us this evening. There will be no presentation to this committee. We will go straight into questions. So if I ask members questions, please, starting with Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know, following up previous similar conversations around parking, do we now know what percentage of PCNs are paid upfront and how many go to debt collection? Thank you.
I don't have the information with me, but it's certainly information that we can get, and it's information that we will hold on our processing system. So I'm happy to take an action point from that and provide that to the committee, if that's acceptable.
Yes, thank you.
I can see Liz writing notes, so yes. Do you wish to follow up with a question?
It's a different question, thank you. When it talks about moving traffic, there are certain, like vehicle restricted routes or no entry or prohibited right turn, which actually get most of the contraventions. I think a similar question was asked last time as well, but are the corresponding road signs visible or large enough or suitable for people to see? Because these, the contraventions that we... Thank you.
Whenever we're looking at parking enforcement, it's very heavily legislated, and that includes all the signs and the lines. There is a manual that's a statutory instrument called the Traffic Signs and General Directions Regulations. And that covers what a sign should be in terms of what it should contain, the colour, the size, and everything else. And the aim of that is to ensure that signage across the whole of England and Wales is the same. So in answer to your question, yes, we do comply.
Councillor Gardner?
I'm going to ask about blue badges and your staff. I get quite cheesed off, as you probably know, because you probably see there's a lot of people parking in areas designed for disabled people. They're clearly not disabled in any way, shape or form. I have actually accosted several people in my usual manner. I've been incredibly polite, as you can imagine, and have been told to go away. But what upsets me is also when you see some of your officers going to speak to people, they're abused by people. Like, how dare you question me? I mean, okay, people do have invisible disabilities. I understand that. I've got no problem with that at all. But it's just, first of all, that I've seen your officers on their own, which I don't approve of, because I think because of some of the abuse that get in the area that I represent, I'm not speaking for any other areas in the borough, but some of the abuse they get, I think it'd be easier if there was two of them all the time. But I'm just trying to work out, how often do you go to places where blue badges or the disabled parking is being abused? I mean, I've let you know of several areas where it's going on, but I don't know. Have you got enough staff to carry to cover it. So I see you smiling like that, Richard. Obviously the answer is no. No, but I just thinking about the people that get teased off who've got blue badges. I mean, I've got a blue badge. I'm entitled to a blue badge, don't get me wrong, but I've also got a big mouth, as some of you may know. And I'm quite capable of holding my own with people, but I've seen other disabled drivers trying to park and then being abused by other people because they've actually parked in their spot, basically. I just wonder how your staff are coping. I mean, I'm going back to the safety aspect again, because I genuinely worry about your staff, because I've seen some of the things that are shouted at them. I mean, I know they've got body-worn cameras, haven't they, as well, but I think some of the stuff is just disgusting, but I'm also coming on their behalf and also the behalf of disabled people who are they're getting abused as well, basically. So I wonder how, do you need more staff? Don't say anything, Richard.
If I comment on that point first, and then Freddie will comment a bit more about the blue badges. So in terms of staffing, what we obviously do is we work very closely with APCO, the contractor, to look continually at hotspots, deployment patterns, and effectively where is the most non-compliance and what are we doing, what can we do to maximise our ability to deal with that non-compliance, which is why, for example, we've, as you probably know, it's been agreed we'll obtain a car which is ANPR equipped to give us the ability to get to more remote areas more quickly, so we can redeploy CEOs who would otherwise be walking on foot trying to cover large areas to areas where we know there's higher non-compliance. So it is a matter that's continuing under review, but there is clearly a point. There's about, I think, under our contract, 50 CEOs engaged, obviously on rotas and shifts. There is a point where you clearly hit the point where there's too many, but equally there is at times difficulties deploying to all the best places. Freddie will comment a bit more about blue badges. It's worth just mentioning the Council 14 do specific blue badge fraud operations throughout the year. So they will use the information that's reported to us as a council to target areas where we think there's more blue badge fraud. But Freddie will talk a bit more about the parking side of it.
Yes, could you just clarify for me, Councillor, when you say people that are parking with disabled badges, are they the ones that are being abused, or are they other drivers are coming up and abusing them?
No, the people that are being abused are the people who have a legitimate blue badge, who query why. I mean, people going into a leisure centre, sorry, with the greatest respect, I mean, we're down there quite a lot. If I could go and use all the gym equipment, I wouldn't warrant a blue badge, but these are people that are going, obviously taking a pee. And then when somebody will say, excuse me, should you be in that bay, they get met with a load of abuse. But I've also seen some of your officers that have been told to go away.
Yeah, I think I understand. We're talking, I think, about people that are misusing the badge rather than genuine users.
Oh, yeah.
The issue that we have with that, as you quite rightly said earlier, there are unseen disabilities. So it's very difficult for a civil enforcement officer to make a decision there and then whether he's going to challenge that person. Now, their challenge is very limited. They can only ask to inspect the badge, but they can't do anything more. Confiscation of badges can be done by our fraud team, and as Richard mentioned earlier, they do pair up with our civil enforcement officers and go out and carry out these actions, if you like, which lead to prosecutions. The difficulty that we have is that if you can imagine someone that's parked there, by the time this gets fed back, they're long gone. So it's a question of, if we're intelligence-led and we have enough information to show that there's a particular stretch or area where this is continuing, we can then work with fraud to kind of target that. But if we're looking at just the ad hoc thing, unfortunately there's not a lot that we can do in terms of nipping it in the bud there and then.
Councillor Garner, do you wish to have a follow-up before I move on?
Yeah, can I give you a list of several areas that it would be really great if they just went and asked everybody. I mean, I've been parked in I've been in somebody's car with a blue badge. Nobody has ever asked to see the blue badge. So I mean, I could give you probably 3 good areas.
I welcome that. Thank you.
Councillor Banerjee?
I've got a couple of things to go, Chair.
We do one question, then a supplementary, and then you can go round later and ask. Can you put your mic on, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, just wanted to build on Councillor Call's request. Is it possible to get those PCNs broken down by which ones are going to court and entering debt recovery as well? Just those sort of columns. And secondly, this applies, I think, to a lot of us. I'm frequently contacted about inconsistency and, sometimes odd timings for parking enforcements, both in my own ward and across the borough. If Councillor Smallwood were here, I no doubt he'd raise concerns about Ruislip Lido as like a really key example. Please can you explain how the council monitors the deployment of enforcement officers to ensure they are not only attending as required, but also doing so during peak times and when their presence is most needed, and what checks are in place to make sure that resources are being used effectively and responsibly? Thank you.
With regards to the PCN, the first question, when you say court, do you mean to the adjudicator, or do you mean to the district court, or do you mean all?
So if you don't pay, I'm assuming it goes to court, or chase like credit if people.
Maybe if I gave you an overview, then we can try and narrow it down. So the parking ticket's issued. The recipient of the ticket gets an opportunity to either challenge, and as that progresses, there are more statutory forms that are served or delivered, posted. They can then, if at the end of that process decide that they still disagree with the council's decision to enforce it, they can take that case to an adjudicator, a parking adjudicator. That adjudicator will hear the case, we'll put forward some evidence, they'll put their side of the argument, and the adjudicator will make a decision, and we're both legally bound by that. If there is no interaction by an individual and the case progresses, it goes beyond that, where they can't make an appeal, it then gets registered at the courts. Once it's registered at the courts, after 28 days, the court can issue a warrant, what's called a warrant of execution, which then gets passed to an enforcement agent, a bailiff, if you like. After that, they can still approach the court, not to appeal the ticket, but on the grounds of a legal, say for example in the interest of justice, they can put in what's called a late witness statement. If they do that, they then can put in what's called an N244, which is basically a submission to a district court. So the difference between, when I mentioned earlier, the adjudication and the courts.
We can provide a breakdown. We have that, and our finance team track it closely as well. So in terms of working with APCOA around deployments and understanding what deployments are actually happening, how do we know that what we're asking for is happening? Firstly, our team actually have access to the tracking system to enable us to see where CEOs have been. So at any time we can go in and check and see what time someone or a CEO may have been deployed in which location. So if you identify somewhere like Ruislip Lido, if we get a query about deployments of CEOs in that area on a peak day, we can actually see the times they were in the area and what roads, and all the data around their activity, such as PCN issues as well. That sits alongside monthly monitoring meetings where we give a great deal of discretion to APCOA about how they best use the resource, because they get more information both from the CEOs on the ground, but also from reports from the public coming direct, and they deploy when they get, we have a hotline, they will, if someone calls, they generally can be deploy a CEO to deal with that issue. Normally in around 45 minutes a CEO will be at that location where it is in the borough. So day to day, minute by minute, they're managing those deployments to use the available resources to the areas where they know there are problems and areas where we get consistent problems. But we review monthly with them. Freddie has a monitoring meeting with them, and if we have specific areas we want to focus on, we will ask for the data specifically about those areas. And through all those processes, we're able to see just what's working, what isn't working.
Councillor Banerjee, just to follow up. Okay, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. Where do I go first? So we actually went out on a frontline visit with the officers. Them officers are very good, but they are very vulnerable. We witnessed officers getting assaulted, the device taken off, they used the radio, they called a code red, I believe the term was. They then received a phone call, do you need the police? In my eyes, if an officer has called a code red, why are they getting a phone call to say, do you need the police? By then they could have been stabbed, attacked. The officer we were actually with had his handheld device taken off of him, and nothing was done. The officer wasn't asked to give a witness report. There was no interaction with our control room, because ABCOA are not based in our control room. That was really shocking. We've got 3,000 cameras in this borough that can be live and active at any one time. And the ABCOA staff are in an office away from that. If I was a traffic warden, I would not approach anyone in this borough for the fear of being attacked. There is no support for them when it comes to that. We had to stand back, and it took every ounce of me in my trade that I do for a living not to try and get involved and resolve that. I understand the staff and the officers are conflict management trained, but there was a camera above the officer's head that no one put live to protect them. They've got a device that tracks where they are only whilst it's in their hand. That member of the public took that device and could have gone off. That officer, no one would have known where that officer was because there's no tracking on them. Their safety, we really need to look into that. That it generally was at 6:30 in the evening, the officer was surrounded by 5, maybe 6 males outside a CAF. It was a very hostile situation that officer did very well, but shouldn't have had to deal with that. And he was vulnerable, really vulnerable. And I know we've made some recommendations after that visit, and I understand they've still not been put into place. And that's really quite concerning, that officers are out there vulnerable. I know it's a bit of a hard hit from me, but I really felt, I've held this for a few months now, and I feel that we need to do something urgently on that. It was really quite concerning. I don't know if anyone else had a comment on that, because you were there.
I would just echo that, and particularly around the CCTV, where we, as we said, we have the infrastructure in place. If the assistance is required, having an active control room at the Civic with no visibility on the office when we've got the cameras there must be a way of linking up that switch on the warden's device to alert the control room straight away to say, well, where's the cameras nearby? We can try and zoom in and assist the contractor as well. That was my own feedback, but I appreciate it's a question from Councillor Davis, so we'll take the officer's answers first before other members wish to intervene.
So yes, I think I recall seeing the footage of that incident. It was quite concerning. It was quite extreme. Well, firstly, with the code reds, the first thing that happens, I believe, and Freddie will correct me if I'm wrong, is obviously that enables any other CEOs in the area to be alerted and to attend. And in that case, there was other CEOs on site very quickly. And one of the many benefits of that, apart from the protection of the individual, is that you've then got multiple body-worn videos all recording what's happening. Now, one of the things we've done a number of times and endeavour to do when we have those incidents, and they are part of the monthly monitoring, we get those reports that come through to us, so we have sight on all of those incidents, is we work very closely with the police. So we will try to make sure we get reports made to the police of those incidents. And I say try because it's not always the case that the CEO wants it reported to the police. But where we can, we will get those reported to the police, we'll get the evidence packaged to the police, and then we'll follow it up. I will follow it up, or my community safety team will follow it up with the police to find out what has happened to that case. And in a number of cases, we're assured that people have cautioned, in some cases prosecuted when the evidence supports it or it's significant enough.
Sorry, Chairman, just to come back on that, we was with 3 officers the day we went out. There was 3 officers with us. So, pardon? 3 wardens with us. But again, that officer was on his own because the other 2 were down the street. They wasn't straight in there until after it happened. And I'm just really concerned, look, why have we not put ABCOA in the control room? Because if a code red was to go off, ABCOA, even if you just put the ABCOA radio in there, a code red goes in, code red, Apple Tree Avenue, code red Apple Tree Avenue. If we have any cameras in the area, our control room can beam in on that. That's where we need to be looking. I understand resources are very hard if peak time, say 3 o'clock when you're hitting schools, churches, everything in the area, and there could be one officer on his own. That could take someone 15 minutes to get there. 15 minutes is a long time. 3 minutes is a long time in that situation, and it was hostile, and I've been in pubs on a Friday night, and that was borderline that, and it was 6 o'clock on a Thursday or Wednesday evening. So we definitely need to look at that.
Noted, thank you. And I don't have an immediate answer about the CCTV control room. I'll take that away and ascertain whether that's been considered before. If there's a technical reason why that's not happened, I don't know the answer, but thank you. We will look at that.
Councillor Davis, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. I'm going to have loads of questions on this, but we'll go with this one. You mentioned about the hotline, so you can ring up and report an illegally parked vehicle. Do we do our internal KPIs on that phone line? The reason why I ask is because I've rung it a number of times, and I know residents have, and it sounds like, when you ring, it sounds like you've woken the man up. On the other end of the phone, you could wait 15, 20 minutes before the line is answered. I know we now have a electronic system. Press 1 for FPNs, press 1 for a vehicle parked in convention, press 2 for this. Great system. But when you actually get through to talk to someone to talk about an illegally parked vehicle, you could wait 20 minutes quite easily, and then he'll tell you, no, that's in a restricted area, or no, there's no parking management there, they can park there, the yellow lines are not active until 8 till 4. And I respect our officers are very good and well educated, but if I'm giving you a postcode, you can't give me that answer straight away. So my question is, are we KPI in the emergency phone line? If not, we need to look at that.
So there are KPIs about related to the hotline, which enables us to monitor the number of calls and the response times. I think I'm right in saying the hotline is not got that call centre functionality. So I don't believe we can get, unless Freddie tells me otherwise, details of dropped calls, missed calls, abandoned calls, wait times. The systems we've commissioned effectively from our provider don't provide that. We've commissioned a person in a room who answers the phone, and at times that gets too busy.
Sorry, Chairman, is that our phone line or APCOA's phone line?
I'm talking about the parking hotline, which is operated by APCOA. If you're referring to the council's...
No, the APCOA line, is that managed by them or by us?
Yes, the parking hotline is commissioned via APCOA under the contract. That's the parking specific hotline that's published if people want to ring to report a parking issue they want immediate action on.
Thank you.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. Do we collate the data on how many PCNs we issue within resident permit zones? And if so, would you mind sharing that with the committee? And if we don't, why not? Because every single one of those residents who park within a permit zone are paying to do so, and so they should quite rightly expect the service there.
When we issue a parking ticket, we issue it for the contravention, not the location, if that makes sense. But there is a way in which we can get that information in terms of the amount of PCNs, but we'd have to do some manipulation with the data and break it down, because the system isn't built by zone or ward. It's built by contraventions. But we can get that for you.
Yeah, it just makes sense because I mean, surely then, even as a task within your own team, if you're spotting a lack of, to get a CPZ in place is not easy. You need to consult with the residents. There needs to be an issue that leads to it. It's not just you call up and it comes out the next day, right? So surely within your team, it just makes sense to even just conduct that exercise yourself. I'd quite like to see it as part of this committee, but within your team, it makes sense to figure out, right, there's no, like, we put a CPZ in place in X road, but we haven't picked up any parking tickets there. Maybe we should go and check. Or like, oh, it looks quite low, but actually if I looked at it a year ago, it looks, it was higher. Maybe, like, have we sent enough people there? That's kind of what that's what strikes me about that. I'd quite like to see that data. I'm surprised it wasn't included in the report at all, or that it isn't collated for you guys on a regular basis. But I do have a supplementary, Chair. My supplementary is quite a broad question. And forgive me because these are figures that I've pulled off Google for neighbouring areas, but it's not in the same year as ours. So the Hillingdon PCN figure that we have in our report for 2024-2025 says that we've issued 109,885 PCNs. A neighbouring borough, I won't name which one, but there's only a few, so in 2022-23, so a couple of years ago, issued 232,658. In light of that, do you think our officers are doing enough, and do you think we're getting good value for money from them?
So on the first point, just to come back on the PCNs by ward, I think this has come up before, certainly in discussion. It might even be here, and I think we'll need to check this. But I think the reason why it's not in the report, because this report is about what we publish into the public that is useful to them. So if that's helpful, we would like to include it. However, I think the issue is that, as Freddie says, the data we get about PCNs might enable us to identify the street, etc. But to actually map it by zone, we then have to map all the streets in a zone and cross-reference that, which we could probably do, but it's a data manipulation task I don't think we've ever automated enough to be able to do that consistently. It becomes quite a large task. But we can look at that, especially now as we do much more mapping and GIS mapping, that it might be more capable. In terms of comparisons with other boroughs, my personal view is the headline data is really not helpful for a comparison, because the number piece, firstly, we don't target issuing PCNs. That's not right. We target compliance. The number of PCNs that are issued depend on so many factors. How many restrictions there are, how many CEOs you deploy, how many cameras you've got in different locations. Lots of ours come from yellow box junctions and no restricted turns, as we spoke about before. How many of those junctions have you got in your area that you're monitoring by camera? There's so many factors to compare a borough against a borough and question whether you're working efficiently or effectively just on those headline figures. It's impossible to make that comparison. You have to spend so much time going below the surface to understand what your policy positions are, for example, on things like many boroughs have areas like healthy school streets, which result in quite a large number of issue of PCNs because people breach the restriction of travelling down a road at a given time. We don't have those. So you have to then look at all the policy positions to understand it as well. So it would be a complicated and lengthy piece of work to really draw any conclusion about the effectiveness of your enforcement service without taking all those factors into account.
Right, sorry, if I could just come back on that quickly. It's a comment rather than a question. It's more than double, Richard. It's 232,000 is way more than double of 109,000. I'm not having a look here between like 100 PCNs here or there. It's not, and I don't know what the most up-to-date figures are now, but it's probably more than that. It's not. I'm not asking to compare like apples and eggs here. It's. I understand there's different factors here, but my overall question is: do you think we're doing enough? Which hasn't really been answered.
When we look at boroughs, there are key differences amongst them. You have some boroughs that have large rural areas, and some that are extremely built up. Now, obviously, I don't know the borough that you're referring to. But in terms of comparing like for like, as Richard said before, it's kind of difficult to look at that and say, well, they're doing this and we're not doing that. The other thing it comes down to is, as Richard said, policy. There are some authorities out there that are very, I wouldn't say aggressive, but they have a very low tolerance to non-compliance, whereas we have a slightly different tolerance to that, in the sense that, you know, we would cancel the first time contravention for somebody with a blue badge, although we don't have to. We do, because it's customer friendly, it's considered the right thing to do. So there's all these other little factors that come into it. So to try and compare, you know, I don't know, one borough with another is is difficult.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, my pens are running out. First of all, I just want to echo what's been said by Councillor Davis and the Chair about the safety of officers, because I've regaled this committee on previous occasions about what I've seen. A particular incident that happened while I was in my former ward with behaviour that was carried on. And on that occasion, there were two officers. On a similar occasion, one officer was down the other end of the road, and the other one was down the other end. And one of them, his camera battery failed. It was really fortunate that the other guy came along and was able to capture what was needed on there. I called the police on that occasion and got the police, and they went around and found the guy, had a word with him. But that really needs to be looked at. I would encourage that to be reviewed. There should be something more to protect the officers. They're only doing their jobs. No one likes tickets, but that's what they're doing. A comment, first of all, on the report itself. While we've got sort of trend analysis, this is page 5 of 19, page 29 of the report. We've got some trend analysis month on month, but for example, we don't have comparators for permits issued on page 12 of 19, page 36 of the agenda pack, and similarly for page 42 or 18 of 19 of the report, for comparison purposes. So we don't know what's going up, what's going down. It's just, unfortunately, a list of numbers that don't really tell us very much about what's going on year. I say yes, we can look at the trends of the PCNs issued, but that's more of a comment. Earlier when you mentioned the ANPR vehicle, which I'm not sure what or if any conclusion has been reached on the use of it, but you have said it should free up officer staff if it goes ahead, or if it is going ahead. Something that's been in the news of late is these things are ghost plates. So what is being done to sort of tackle that or overcome that sort of issue that exists with people putting these stickers and things over their number plates? Obviously, there's the case of fraudulent number plates that people have nicked off other vehicles and put them on their own.
We don't really see an awful lot of ghost plates for parking, because I think it's more to do with speeding and things like that. I mean, if I haven't run reports, because we wouldn't be able to have a report to tell us. But what we tend to do is that if we come across a vehicle where they claim it's been cloned, we would require a crime reference number. So they would report that to the police, because that's a crime. The police would then give them a number. We would then take that number. We would then cancel that case, because obviously they were nowhere near the London Borough of Hillingdon when this ticket was issued. Do we get an awful lot of them? Off the top of my head, I wouldn't say a lot, but we get them fairly regular. It's certainly something that I feel has increased year on year. In terms of a civil enforcement officer coming across a plate with some sort of sticker on it, I've not had any feedback of that happening. I think if you're going to use these ghost plates in the way that people do, they use it to avoid more like speeding on motorways, moving kind of contraventions rather than static. So we would cancel a case where the evidence shows that it was cloned. Yeah.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just curious if that was anything that was what you would do to sort of try and mitigate that issue. Another thing is to do with enforcement generally. So double yellow lines are enforceable 24/7 as far as I'm aware, yet the enforcement officers only work until 10 p.m. So what is the procedure where something is happening, where there's parking infringements beyond that time? What do residents do?
I think the simple answer is we don't have a parking enforcement service that operates outside of the hours that we've contracted with our provider. So if we get, and clearly we review these positions, but if we're getting significant numbers of reports from residents about parking problems outside those hours, that will prompt a review. I don't believe we are, but it may be that people are not reporting those problems to us because they know the service isn't there.
Councillor Core?
Thank you, Chair. I echo the safety concerns. But what also concerns me is that some of the questions that we've asked have been previously asked and we have not had responses to. For example, I think Councillor Farley did ask for trends last time as well, and things about data that were mentioned were previously raised as well. And as Councillor Davis said, the concerns about the safety was raised afterwards, and it finds no mention in the report. So we need to see what we are saying is actually being done on the ground, and not just, you'll come back to us with the data, that's fine, but when? I remember the trends question being asked, and when Councillor Davis said that we raise the issues about safety, they don't find anything in here.
So in terms of the point about trends, I mean, obviously the item today is about the parking annual report, and if I've noted that there's a request for us to look at putting trend data in that parking annual report. The purpose of the report, the parking annual report, is we're required to publish an annual report. The legislation lays down some elements of what we should be publishing. We've added more. We're more than happy to add more what people might think would be useful. I don't know if this parking annual report came to the committee last year. I was not present at a meeting where it did. So if it was raised that you wanted this in the parking annual report last year, I apologise for the fact that it isn't. I wasn't told that had requests to include that trend data in this report had come from this committee, but we could do it for this year easily enough.
Thank you.
Councillor Cord, do you have a follow-up?
There's another question, and it's a curiosity question. When we suspend parking bays and all of that, especially for the third-party contractors, do we seek financial compensation for that or not? Because there are sometimes, there are roadworks that go a long time, and for, say, gas works or something else, which is disruptive. But I just wanted to understand, do we get some kind of financial compensation for those services when they make us suspend the parkings and stuff like that? Thank you.
Not compensation in the sense that if they say that they're going to finish the works within 3 days and they've drifted into 4, they pay us £1,000. It doesn't work like that. We don't have those powers. What we do, we charge them per bay, per day. So there is a financial income for us in order to suspend that bay. And we do that for utilities, we do that for house removals, we'll do it for, all legitimate reasons and make a charge.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the way we track the officers. So in the report we mentioned about the handheld device that they use. How do we know, for example, Rycip Lido or a large parking area, that the officers are not just riding through with the handheld device? Because it doesn't give you, it's not on the person. So the officer could leave the handheld device in the car, for example, take a walk along 10 cars, get back in. We've got no way of checking. Have we looked at the idea of tracking the body, not the device? So I know UPS, for example, or the Royal Mail track their posties to going into every driveway. We could do that within parking bays.
The parking enforcement system, the back office system, is linked to the handheld or the mobile that they use. And there is a geo menu in there. I don't have access to it because it's not within my remit, but I know that there is a geo unit in there. They can go in and pinpoint where that handheld is. Now, CEOs are not supposed to put their handhelds down or to leave them anywhere. And if they're caught doing that, well, then that becomes a disciplinary investigation to try and understand why, whether there's any mitigation, whether it's something that could be accepted or not. But in terms of tracking them, that's what we have. We do have a geo-fencing, a menu within the back office system that we can go into and see where they are at any one time.
Councillor Davis?
Yeah, so I really want to ask two questions, so I'm going to try and put them together. How do I do it? How accurate is that device, and what evidence is given that the current parking enforcement strategy is successfully reducing illegal and unsafe parking? That's a very good question. I've not asked to. So
It's a very, very good question. In terms of the actual system, how accurate, the honest answer for me is I don't know, but I can find out. As I said, it's not something that I use in my day-to-day work, but I'm aware it's there. In terms of the other bit, do you think you could pick that up?
what evidence is there that the current parking enforcement strategy is successfully reducing illegal or unsafe parking? How do we know our strategy is working? Because a resident won't come and tell us that they drove away from a bay before the parking enforcement officer got there. So how do we know that we're capturing and we're stopping illegal parking?
I think our answer to that is that we are probably in common with, I would suspect, all London boroughs struggling to manage illegal parking. We said that publicly last year. We applied to increase the fine level that we could apply, because what we're seeing is despite significant effort and increasing number of PCNs being issued, contravention rates are not going down. We're not seeing behaviour change. That's what we're trying to get. What the enforcement approach is ultimately quite a blunt instrument of punishing people for illegal behaviour. That is not resulting in discernible reduction in identified non-compliance with parking and traffic legislation. And I don't think, but for a minute, we're alone in that.
Okay.
I've got two more members wishing to ask questions, but at this point I'd just like to remind members that time is marching on a bit and we've got two other items to discuss, so if we can keep the questions and the answers a bit more briefer so we can make progress, please. So, Councillor Gardner, please.
Just a quick thing. We've got 3,000 CCTV cameras in the borough. I don't think we have many staff. I think it might be worthwhile checking what hours they work. They're not 24/7 for a start, but I'm not 100% sure, but I think if somebody's off, then the room's sometimes not covered. So it might be worthwhile. I'll put a question in if you want about that, because you definitely need more CCTV staff.
Obviously, it's not directly related to parking, but it is in relation to safety. It's correct. We don't have sufficient staff to manage and to maintain 24/7 monitoring in our control.
Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make this quick. I'm a substitute in this committee, so apologies if this question has been asked before. I did have a look through the report. Something I couldn't find, and it's a very specific category, is vehicles that have been parked legally but are damaging like the road or the pavement. It's a massive issue in my ward, I think all our wards, and with this current government's aggressive house building plan, it's not going to go away. HGVs park on the pavement on the road, they crack it. Is that scope within officer scope? If not, why not, and should it be? Because what we really struggle with is then fining these companies for damaging our roads. And it's just, I really struggle to do this, and I think it should be included, and I'd just like to get your thoughts on that, please. Thank you.
Yes, since 1974 it's been illegal across the whole of London, every single London borough, to park with your wheels on the verge or on the pavement, unless the council allows it. And in some very narrow roads they do, but in the majority of roads they don't. So it's an automatic, you don't need a traffic management order because it's in the legislation. And it's something that we actively issue for. Now, in terms of larger vehicles, there is a specific contravention code that we can use when we come across them. So the answer to your question is yes, we can take action, and we do.
Yeah, and just a supplementary check. So one of the things we struggle with is giving evidence to officers that this happened. They very rarely follow up. So if the PCN has been issued, that's almost like, double evidence saying actually they got issued a fine, they damaged the road, so they should definitely follow up with them. Thank you.
Just to point out, the data on page 32 of your report shows we issued 11,320 paying charge notice last year for vehicles parked with one or more vehicles on or over footpath or on any part of a road other than a carriageway.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next item now, so thank you to the officers for their answers. If there are any more questions, do please feel free to feed it back through Liz, and she will liaise with the officers outside of this meeting to get the answer to your questions. And you're free to leave if you wish to do so, as usual. So we'll move on now to item 7, which is the Town Centre Regeneration, Uxbridge and Hayes Town, pages 45 to 50. And we have Julia this evening. Thank you for your patience. There'll be no presentation required. We'll go straight to questions on this one. Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Julia, for joining us and for waiting as well. My first question is, I noticed in the report you mentioned that the regeneration funding has come through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, the UK SPF Fund. Just yesterday in the Chancellor's Consumer Spending Review, she announced that post-2026 there will be no UK SPF funding going to anyone in London, any borough in London. How is that going to impact these schemes? Is it fully costed, or were you expecting a bit more and a bit of a top-up later?
Yes, it was news to us yesterday in terms of that announcement. We have only got a programme that relates to the funding we have received for this year, and hopefully we're required to spend all the money we have in this year. So we are already thinking about how we carry this work forward, and looking at some of the potential funding options we have to do that, because we are starting to see an impact from the work, and it would be a shame if we couldn't continue that. So we've got that in mind in terms of how we're looking forward. But we do want to try and access as much grant funding as possible to keep the work going.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. I have a different question now as well. Could you confirm if local S&T teams, safety neighbourhood teams, or antisocial behaviour teams have been part of the design processes for both regenerations, especially I'm thinking about nighttime safety as well, like whether they've had any input to lighting or open spaces or safety or safety features or things that they might identify as potential risks with the new plans and designs?
That's a really good question. We have been liaising with the Safe Communities team, which sits under Richard, but I don't know if we have had that direct engagement with police officers, so I will take that away, because that would be really useful insights to have.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
I'm going to talk about Hayes Town, which I don't know. A couple of things. I'd like to thank you for the paragraph about Hayes, the first paragraph, which was, that's somebody, and actually, I think you have been around, haven't you, with David, yeah. My problem is with the developments. I mean, I have the old vinyl factories in my back garden, basically. They were promised the earth when it was originally the plans went in, but there's no cinema, there's no health centre, there's lots of empty buildings there, and I'm sure I got in contact with you recently about a sign. Yes, I won't go on about that, but it worries me slightly that we're regenerating, but some of the stuff that hasn't been produced. I know that I speak to residents in both the old vinyl factory and High Point Village, and both of them have been disappointed by what they were promised and what they actually got. And as I say, the sign that I sent you is a bit worrying. And also, when you do any consultations in terms of developing more programmes and interventions, can councillors be consulted, please? Because, as I say, I actually live in the area, so I know exactly what's going on, and I just sort of like, I don't know who you ask, but say in Hayes, I'd like to be consulted, and I have got a supplementary. The clock's still not working by the station, which is supposed to be, a big feature in Hayes, this thing, but the clock is still not working, and that people are complaining about that. Oh, it's like you're regenerating, blah, 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 blah. And the subway, although stuff has been done there are still people sleeping there. There are actually, we know who they are, but I mean the bottom line is that's welcome to Hayes. Oh dear. That's about it basically. Oh yeah, and Ferry Corner. Can we please publicise that. Very corner, I mean, that area was really part of the history of Hayes, to be perfectly honest with you, apart from EMI. I mean, the helicopters and everything, well, you know, because you've been around since God was a boy, haven't you, Darren? No, but I mean, things like that people need to know about, because although we've got loads of different communities, I think they would benefit by actually learning about the history. Yeah, that's my moan.
That's all really useful impact. So yeah, on the old vinyl factory and High Point Village, I think that's been a learning point, I think, for the planning authority in terms of these big master plan sites, about how we structure how they're delivered in future. And it's something we've taken forward, that when we are securing community benefits, we need to make sure they're delivered up front before people are moving into the housing. And that's something we have very much taken on board with future schemes. But in terms of the old vinyl factory, with this funding that we've got, we have put in a Hayes specific officer, and they actually base themselves in one of the buildings in the old vinyl factory every Wednesday, so they're down on site. We've been sort of created a sort of landlord liaison group where we are really pushing them about why some of these buildings have remained vacant, and we've been hosting open days with potential occupiers. So we've brought around workspace providers who are interested, creative, who would go in the space maybe as meanwhile or as permanent uses. So we've almost been trying to show them that if a bit of effort goes into it, then that there are opportunities. And we've also managed to secure from the main landowner, Lancet U&I, a sort of unit on the corner, which we're just sorting out the lease, that we'll be able to go in that meanwhile space and sort of generate some activity, and again, kind of proof of concept that people want to go there. And I think that's the message when we held the small music festival we did in March, where we got over 1,200 people there. There was a real sort of sense that people saw the potential in the old vinyl factory, and that, you know, we need to put more push forward to deliver it. So we've got another year of funding, so we're going to keep working on that, and hopefully we'll get some of those buildings occupied. Some of the challenges around where the cinema should have been and the powerhouse, which is the large kind of spray painted unit, they are going to be longer term issues to resolve. But we are looking as well at some of the planning powers we could utilise, such as Section 215 notices, which are about sort of tidying up the amenity of the sites at the very least, and making sure that they're secure. But obviously we would prefer to do more with that. So it is a real focus. And they say I've been going down there a lot more than I have, to make sure that I'm understanding the issues on site. I did cycle past the clock this morning and didn't notice it wasn't working, so I will take that with David and make sure we sort that out. I think there are issues in terms of with the supplier that we've gone back to them on, so I will make sure that's chased. I agree with you on the subway. I actually have photographs of my phone, because I don't think it's been finished on the stairway. There are panels missing, and I agree with all the rubbish that's collecting under the things, and obviously, yeah, it's being used, so I'll have a chat with ASB team and my team about what we can do around that. And I think the history of Hayes is fascinating. I think learning about you know, things that were invented there, radar and the history with the music industry, I do think we should be doing more to celebrate that. And even one of our staff does walking tours of Hayes, because I think Hayes has the first building made of concrete in the country. It's another one of the facts, and takes it down, and obviously David's got all that knowledge as well. So yeah, I think we say in the note we've a bid to the Mayor for another £50,000, which we're going to put towards a kind of regeneration framework, which is trying to bring all together all these sort of strands and set a sort of series of objectives moving forward. And I think you're absolutely right. We will speak to yourself and all the other ward councillors as we move that forward. So hope to go and have a walk round Hayes or meet on site in the old vinyl factory and have some of those discussions.
Councillor Davis?
I am like Janet. I haven't been round as long as Janet has, but my family history in Hayes has been here for a very long time, and there is a lot of history. But we'll leave that one to Janet. What incentives and support schemes are being offered to encourage business retention and to attract new enterprise? Currently, Hayes is a regeneration programme. We've had a new chicken shop open, we've had a new betting shop open, we've had a new fruit and veg shop open. That's amazing to add to the other 15 that we already have. We're allowing 24-hour greengrocers, that's amazing. But what is driving people to our high street? We've lost Argos, we've lost Wilko, we've lost Woolworths. What is driving people to go to Hayes? We're going to spend a lot of money on regeneration, but what what have we got in the background encouraging I don't know, the Sports Direct of Hayes Town sort of thing? What are we encouraging to get that in there? What are we offering?
Yeah, in terms of the sort of privately owned shops on the high street, we do have very little influence, even with the planning system now, in terms of, you know, we used to have more control over the types of shops that went in, but they're all in this single use class now, so it's hard for us when they change from a shop to a cafe and things like that. We don't have the powers to kind of control that. We used to have the sort of 50% retail on the high street, and obviously things have moved on. I think the feedback we have got, a lot of the work Brunel has, is that the high street hasn't changed with the development that's come in, and that is something we're sort of exploring about what is it that would sort of drive some of that, and as you say, bring more of those larger retailers that the residents would find beneficial. And then the other thing we're looking at through the local plan is the town centre got the right boundary? So that's something we're thinking about, and whether we need to kind of make it larger to bring in areas such as the old vinyl factory, so that we can have more control over the ground floor units in those areas and what they operate as. And we have been, like I said, we've been taking round kind of workspace providers, so people that try and activate the ground floor of large developments and kind of bring in small businesses, startups, creatives, artists. So they're really interested in it, because they're the people that operate out in East London at the moment, where sort of 15 years ago they went in as kind of meanwhile spaces, and rents have gone up massively in East London as it's become kind of trendy. And so we're taking them to Hayes, and it's got all the same. It's got, you know, the canal. It's got the history that they're finding really interesting. So we're trying to kind of push that. So we are thinking through our inward investment, where Becky mentioned the meeting, the event we did in February. We're thinking of doing another one in the autumn, and thinking how we kind of have that kind of push out to kind of what is the sort of selling point of these town centres that would make people kind of want to come and invest and work and live there.
Yeah, we're going to go a completely opposite direction. How do we know the regeneration is working? So how do we monitor that it is working? I call it the Red Brick Estate, because that's where I grew up, but you know it's the Owen Road Estate, I believe it, or the Austin Road Estate. How do we? So that estate there has gone through one of the biggest changes ever. If you wanted to know to direct someone in Hayes, you'd say behind the Red Brick Estate, etc. How do we know what the changes that we've made as a council are working? And also the boards that are around the Red Brick Estate, as I'm going to call it, can we please have them so they don't look like a building site? They look a bit welcoming, because they are just purple. They've got the Mayor of London on there, they've got a little bit of Hillingdon, but they've got nothing on there. Let's talk to the schools and get them to decorate them or something, just so they look a bit better. Sorry, Chairman, I know that was 2 questions, I won't do it again.
I guess with the Austin Road Estate, we're still constructing, or just coming up to the end of phase 1. So in terms of how we would then monitor the kind of social and economic benefits of that, it's a good question that we can take back and discuss. We do have, again, an on-site kind of housing regen officer that's working with the community and liaising and kind of looking at all the social value that comes from that development. I think we will need a bit longer for the scheme to be occupied to just kind of understand some of the wider benefits, but through the planning process we have sought to improve the links down onto the canal, the links into the town centre, to kind of integrate the space, and obviously try to increase the proportion of affordable housing alongside. So the planning application requires all the affordable housing that was there to be re-provided, but there is a very small uplift as well, so that we're providing slightly more affordable housing on the site as well, and obviously hopefully providing opportunities for families through some of the larger units to be there. But yeah, we are looking how we kind of knit in some of those kind of enhancements to particularly the canal side as part of the Austin Road scheme. And yeah, I will talk to colleagues who are working on site in terms of the boards and give me your feedback.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. Councillor Davies would be happy to know that even though I don't live in Hayes, the 24/7 fruit and veg shop does actually attract me there. They do the best hummus in the borough, and that's a fact.
There's 3 of them.
Yeah, all of them. All of them are brilliant. More fruit and veg for everyone. My question is about parking, but just before I get to my question as well, just if I could pick up on something that Councillor Davies also just said now about getting communities in, getting schools involved, etc. I mean, we heard earlier in this meeting that Heathrow is looking to give away grants and funding to schools, communities and charities, etc. If some of those are in Hayes or some of those are in Uxbridge and they integrate with the regeneration, it sounds like we're putting two great things together, and it could really help and benefit. That wasn't a message to Heathrow, by the way, Becky. It was just to Julia, maybe something you take away after the meeting. My question is actually about parking, and I don't need to talk to you. I suppose I sure don't need to talk to you as a director of planning about the aggressive housing targets that were being given by the Mayor of London within Hillingdon, but actually my concern around it is the lack of parking spaces that kind of go with those places. As we're looking into the regeneration, what are we going to do about the people on those cards? Because what we don't want to do, as you know, we extensively questioned Richard and Freddie over there when they were here, but what I don't want to happen is they end up going onto residential streets and sidelines, end up with an increase in CPZs as a result of people who are in those flats, because we haven't carefully considered what they're going to be doing about their cars. Because whether we like it or not, they're going to have cars. The interborough connections within the borough, especially north to south, aren't strong enough to take on the existing framework that residents require, and so they will have to focus on a car in one way or another. What are we doing to mitigate that?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of parking through the planning process, we do have the policies and the parking levels that we have to follow, and for us, because it came second, they are set by the London plan, and it comes down to public transport accessibility. So, for example, Hayes and Uxbridge, which we're talking about here, because they've got the tube stations and the bus kind of where the buses all kind of stop, they have the highest public transport accessibilities, which is where the push for car free comes from. What we can do through the planning process is the kind of active travel, so making sure that people have got good access to those stations. We do take money to improve bus services. We do take money, not quite the answer you want, but if we think there's a potential for it to impact on parking residential streets, that's something that comes into the planning balance when we're obviously assessing applications. We can take money in lieu of if a future parking scheme becomes required because there's pressure on streets. We do hold them, and we can hold that for a period of time to help fund that. So yeah, we do as much as we can, but obviously we have to work within the boundaries of the planning policies that we have.
Councillor, do you have a question?
It's just a supplementary based on what Julia said, and that's just, I suppose my question is around if you could, are your team currently, or are there plans to do road assessments, parking assessments perhaps? I don't know if that's the right word, to the streets immediately around the vicinity of the regeneration plan site areas, and see what that potential impact would be, and potentially create some sort of impact report that would feed back to the cabinet member on this, because I'm sure they'd be very interested to know. I know I would.
We don't do post-occupancy surveys at the moment. We would have the data as part of the planning application. There's usually parking surveys that are done at the point of the planning application. Yeah, we can discuss the concept of whether we then go back and do post-occupancy surveys to see if there's been a change on particular sites that members are interested in. It's not, I have to talk to colleagues in parking, but I can take that away as an idea.
Councillor Core.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding is the whole regeneration is to revitalize, bring things back to life and all of that. But the Hayes project doesn't seem to have worked. And I'm just worried that it might replicate in Uxbridge or somewhere else if we don't get the things right. Because while our councillor training was on, our public health team said that for any regeneration or any development, it's important that public health is taken into account in terms of spaces and mental health and all of that. So are we doing that? Like, we need Safer Neighbourhoods team to contribute to it. Are we taking public health input into it, and are we regenerating the way we should be regenerating?
That's a good question. So yeah, there is a move towards, I think you're right, considering planning in the context of wider public health outcomes. There is a push towards that. I guess one of the important elements of that is a sort of plan-led approach, and I think with Uxbridge in particular, we've tried to get the vision there and some of the wider objectives kind of ahead of, we think, a lot of the development coming. in Hayes it's probably been the other way around, that the development has come and we're now trying to sort of catch up with some of the impacts of that and how we can then kind of mitigate moving forward. But some of the projects we're looking at, just for example in Hayes, to your point, is one of the feedback we've had from the youth is there's a lack of leisure facilities for them to go and meet up and hang. So we're talking about whether there's potential to put in a sort of caged football facility on a car park that's someone's kind of offered to do that. So and where there'd obviously be an opportunity to hang out and do some physical activity. So yeah, we're kind of weaving that in, and we've been talking to public health colleagues in Hayes as well with this Meanwhile unit. We're going to put kitchen in there so we can link into some of the work that they're doing around sort of food health and food preparation. So they're very much part of the team. We've kind of got sort of colleagues working together about how can we achieve wider objectives in some of the work that we do. So it's a sort of a start of a so sort of we've only been working kind of in this way on the town centres for probably the last 12 months, so I think we're at the start of it, and hopefully as we move forward you'll see some more of that kind of joined up thinking into these spaces.
Thank you, Chair. And I was reading about regeneration in parts of Europe where high streets is also dying, like, you know, the trend is that way. But they've used this crisis as an opportunity where in a lot of places, due to circular economy, large repair factories have come in where people dump their second-hand stuff. There are people who work on it, and like a second-hand IKEA kind of a thing, which actually takes space, and where people are able to reuse and recycle and learn all about it as well. And they take huge amount of space, but there have been subsidized places where people then actually come in and use it. Would you be open to considering at those are you looking at examples in Europe where they've done regeneration in a way that really works for people?
Yeah, no, we are with the sort of people we're working alongside looking at all those examples of what could we bring into the town centres, like you say, that would bring footfall in. So definitely all those ideas, and I said we've been having open days with some not specifically that sort of organisation, but ones that would kind of come in and use the spaces and do more creative activities there, for example, and reach out to the community. So absolutely, we're open to any ideas. If you've got any examples, it would be really helpful to pass those on.
Councillor Davis.
I'm going to steal one of Councillor Gohill's questions. Talk about parking. The Austin Road site in Hayes, am I right in saying that the residents that were moved out have got a right to move back in? That's the first part of this question.
I believe that's correct. Yes, I think there are spaces. If you had, I need to double check. But if you are coming back and you had a space, I believe there is.
So, from my understanding, them flats there already had garage blocks and already had cars. So we are going to move. Potentially, we can move back 50% of the people that were there that had parking spaces, and increase by an additional 50%. Are we sure that we are going to be able to manage the parking? Because that block had underground parking, it had off-road parking, it had parking bays. We've moved them out, we're going to allow them to move back in, and then we're going to introduce 50% of unknown. There could be potential for 2,000 cars to hit Hayes. I know there's a parking space across the road, but people already had cars when they moved away, and they're moving back in. Have we taken that into account? We should have invited Dr. Alan Tilley for this one, I believe.
I mean, we've taken into account parking pressures as much as we can through the planning process. As I've said, there's always a balancing act between the other benefits of the scheme and the level of housing versus the land use for the sort of area used for parking. So we're in line with policy. As I've said, there are other tools outside the planning system that if parking becomes unmanageable, then that have to be called on, essentially.
No worries, thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. No.
I'm going to finish this item now with Councillor Gardner, and then we'll move on to the next item, please.
Couple of things. Obviously, housing, which I won't go on. I think it's really important that there is a community centre actually in one of the new developments where we've got lots of communities and they can't hire rooms because they haven't got the money. I'll blame that onto the Conservative Council, seeing as you were going on about the Labour government. Is it possible that we can have a community centre that deals with all the different communities? Don't look at me like that. Also, when the 106 monies are from the different developments, why are they not spent in the areas that they're impacted, that the developments are impacted on? I mean, unless I'm very much mistaken, some 106 money for it's either the new development in Clayton Road or somewhere else was used for somewhere in Ruislip. Well, how does that benefit the people who are living in Hayes?
So in terms of the community centre, there is actually an outstanding obligation on the old vinyl factory to provide a community space. It was supposed to be part of the cinema building. So we are still ongoing conversations with the landowner about how they're going to meet that obligation. And that's part of the discussions we're having at the moment with them. In terms of Section 106 monies, it depends on the type of contribution and then the mitigation. So some mitigations are going to be very specific to the site. So if there's a transport requirement, changes to the entrance to the site or parking management and things like that, they'll be very specific. But where the money is taken for things such as carbon offsetting, for example, where that's very hard to kind of localise, the mitigation is allowed to be kind of more borough-wide, and the contributions reflect that, and that's quite standard practice within the sector. So the monies that we take that need to be spent on site, we will, but we will always try and do a sort of geographical approach when we look at 106. But yeah, sometimes the mitigation needs to be elsewhere in the borough, but it's still intended to link to the reason that the money was taken. But there is just sometimes sort of air quality is another example where some of the mitigations might need to be sort of slightly further away from the site, but the idea is they have that kind of borough-wide impact.
Councillor Gardner?
Carefully swerved that one. Wonderful. No, I just wonder if you could perhaps push for the community centres, because I work with a lot of different communities, and I would rather they integrated by all meeting in the same place on different days, but it's part of Hayes, basically.
That's very aggressive. Okay, that's it for this item. Thank you very much for your attendance, Julia, much appreciated. We're going to move on to our next item now, which is the Empty Homes Review. And we have this evening Matt. Thank you for your attendance. You're stepping in at short notice. There'll be no presentation, so again we'll go straight to questions, please, if there are any. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'm a little confused by the report, because on one hand it talks about it's not effective, yet it then goes on to say that we're sort of going to continue with it. So I'd like to sort of understand that difference. But on page 52 it says the total number of accounts with the premium applied is 64, back in October of 22 it's 144. Unfortunately, this data does not support the idea of charging a premium would bring more properties back into use. So this review was done in 22-23. I'm trying to understand why we think this isn't working, yet we are going to continue with it.
What the report doesn't set out is how many more homes would be left empty if this scheme wasn't in place. And there's no way of really knowing that. There are no statistics of something that doesn't exist. The scheme was introduced back in 2013 by the then government to encourage homes to be occupied that would otherwise not be available to the residents of Hillingdon, on the basis that it's the government's intention that this scheme does create more homes. I realise the wording could have been better in the report, that we don't know how many more there would be. A large proportion of councils have introduced this scheme for the same reason.
Councillor Parley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, doing this, the intention, yes, is to hopefully bring more properties into use. There are different demographics, different setups in different parts of the country. So if you go out to the West Country, for example, you've got homes in half a village that's unoccupied for best part of a year because they're owned by people elsewhere. I'm totally in favour of this. And I think when we did this as part of the committee, this was what the intention was that this would do. But it's just I'm just trying to make sure that this is effective. I just really not clear as to how. There's a paragraph here as well that says, which is top of page 52, where it talks about to quickly apply the plan. To quickly apply the second home premium officers plan to contact customers who have a known second home in the summer of 2025. So again, I would have hoped we're further on. So again, now this is some language issue that's been put in the report. I would have hoped we were sort of further on, that we would have been able to identify more in the couple of years since this was recommended.
Thank you, Chair. The paragraph to which you refer relates to second homes and not empty homes. To date, we haven't introduced a second homes premium. That was discussed in the February 2024 budget, and as per the legal requirement, a notice was placed in the local newspaper saying that the council will consult on introducing a second homes scheme from April 2026. We know that a number of people have registered the home as a second home. At the moment, there's no additional charge for that because that hasn't been introduced. We will be consulting with those who have registered before September, just to clarify that it is still a second home. If there's no difference in the charge that you pay, some people may no longer be using it as a second home, but it doesn't make any difference to their bill. They may not have notified us. And we will be consulting as part of the budget setting process in December on the council's overall budget, and this will be one of the things that we include. I realise that the report could have been better worded with regard to your other comments, and I apologise for that.
Thank you. If I could just my own sort of view on it, reading between the lines, it mentions the year of when the charge becomes applicable, and having read it, it says that after year one, there's a lot more homes in the pipeline had we done it after year one rather than further down the line, so there's a lot more potential coming downstream for that, I believe. And also, it looks, in terms of the amounts owed, obviously you had balances of £1 million, then it's gone up to nearly double. It's making officers be more formal in that they have to issue the liability order. So what would you have done had you not issued the liability order? Would you have wrote off that debt?
We will always use whatever endeavours we can to collect the debt. We do write debt off where the person is untraceable, where there's been a bereavement and the estate's been settled and there's no funds available if they've been declared bankrupt. We will use all measures, including recovery through the courts where appropriate, to actually collect the debt.
But a liability order would add a lot more weight to the enforcement and recurring those costs back to the council, I would assume, if we applied for that. Had we just gone the original process before just writing to them and trying to recover the cost that way. So
we can go to court and take out that order. The costs are chargeable to the ratepayer or the council taxpayer if they haven't paid by that date.
Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Davis?
Very quick question from me. Has the council explored combining the premium with like the CPO powers, so to accelerate that. So is there something in line that we could put a CPO on to force the resident to engage quicker, or that sort of thing?
I'm not a lawyer, and in terms of CPOs, if my colleague had been here for another 5 minutes, she may have been able to advise. I will investigate that as a proposal. And of course, power to CPO, you've got to remember that a property that's been empty for maybe 10 years falls into disrepair and has an environmental impact on the neighbourhood. It's not just one empty house, it can affect half the street.
Yeah, thank you.
Any supplementary? No. Any, Councillor Core?
Thank you, Chair. A quick one from me. If the direction of travel is right, which from the sounds of it is, at what point do you think the idea of this will become viable for the council?
Sorry, could you clarify what you mean by viable for the council?
I mean, if we are incurring more costs of collecting the debt that's owed to us, and it's not having the desired effect, in the sense that when it said even if this idea does not ensure that charging a premium would bring more properties back into use, which I understand is besides earning council some money, is the more valid reason for it to go into use, then at what point do you think it's the right place to, when it's like safe and viable, if that makes sense?
That makes sense. The case for whether this proposal goes ahead, and it's still subject to consultation, will be a budget proposal that goes before Cabinet in December and then again in February. As part of that process, we'll prepare a business case that looks at the demographics, looks at the numbers, and if it didn't make financial sense, we wouldn't do it. We may still do it if there was a modest cost to the council, if it brought many more homes back into use or improved the environment in the area where properties have been empty. But there'll be a business case by December when Cabinet will see the budget proposals ahead of full council in February.
I can't see any other indications. If I could just finish with a question from me then. In terms of recovering the cost, are you also including the cost that the council pay to clear the land? So, for example, if they've got overgrown gardens, the council does go in and clear that at the council taxpayers' expense. Is that being considered as part of your recoverable debt, or are you just looking purely at council tax?
This is just the council tax position.
So potentially there's more on top of council tax that should be recovered if you was to go down that liability order process. Okay. Councillor Gohill, I knew there was going to be one.
Sorry, just the last one. It might be a really stupid question. It might be a really stupid question, but it's more for my knowledge than anything else. I know when private companies have debt like this, like energy companies or whatever, and they can't recover that debt, they sell it on to try and recuperate their cost. Does the council do that, or is that illegal, or I don't know? But I know private companies do it. But I'm just trying to think about us recovering our costs and making it viable, as Councillor Core said.
There's no such thing as a stupid question. It's a very good question, and it was raised earlier this week by the management team as to, is it an option? It's known as factoring, you are quite right. The advantages are that you get a percentage of the payment. As a council, we'd receive a certain amount of income. The disadvantages are that private sector companies want to do this for profit. So they will work out what the likely amount ultimately collected is and pay us less. They may be more efficient at collecting that debt, but they may not be as socially responsible and cognizant of individual residents' specific needs.
I understand that. Ultimately, it's not the reason you're doing this is only a couple hundred houses here or there. It's not really about the money so much. It's about the behaviour and about getting people into those empty homes, because, as you know, temporary accommodation within Hillingdon is one of the highest in London. So it's about the behaviours of those people, and if we found a socially responsible company, is it something the council's considering, I guess?
The council will consider all options as part of its budget setting process to maximise the council and benefit the council's position.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Matt, thank you for your attendance this evening, and thank you for your patience for being one of the last items on the agenda this evening. So you may leave if you wish to do so, but I can't imagine there'll be much more business after your item. Item 9 is the forward plan. Are we all in agreement with Councillor Gardner? Thank you. Item 10 is the work programme. Really, Councillor? Yeah. Oh, you're agreeing, or are you asking a question? Go on, Councillor.
Can we add a review to the funeral service, so the breaks bit? I know we did it recently, but I would be interested to see the changes of how it's gone. So even if we did a mini review or something like that, recently, as you all know, I've had an insight to that, and I'd be interested to see where we are as an authority compared to others. So whether it's a mini review or something like that, just have a look at the changes, what's happened recently.
Yes, so we are coming up to look at reviews, so we will be asking members for all of their contributions by way of, suggestions, what we can look at. As we've always done previously, if we don't have the schedule to allow more than one work review, we can certainly look at them as information items, and we've done that on a number of occasions with different things. So by all means, we'll note Breakspear. You can suggest it as and when it comes up for when we look at a review. We could have it as a potential option, but if we can't adopt that, then we can certainly look at it as an information item later in the work programme. Councillor Hill, then Councillor Farley.
Thanks. I noticed on next month's in the work programme, next month's agenda, we got Heathrow expansion. Do we know who's coming?
Liz, do you know at all?
As far as I'm aware, that Heathrow expansion item won't be coming to the July meeting. I think that will be pushed back on the work programme. Yeah, as far as I'm aware. I think it's just because at the moment there isn't really anything concrete that we can be told at this point. That's my understanding.
Thanks for the update.
Councillor Farley?
Ignore me, I found it. I was trying to look for the allotments item. It's very small, I couldn't see it. It's right in there though.
Oh, you go.
I can't see it.
But is that July? So we're getting that in July, are we? The allotments?
Sorry, Councillor Farley, which item is it on the work plan? I can't see it.
I think it's under the information,
yep.
Third from bottom.
Oh, got it.
I think it's July.
That's July by the looks of it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think that's still on track to be July, Liz, is it?
Yes, I haven't heard anything to the contrary, yes, so I believe that will be on track.
Councillor Davis?
Sorry, just on that, can we make sure that we have got the relevant allotment officer here for that? Because I believe that's the main person we need to talk to, and the head of green spaces. Can we just make sure that they are available? If they're not available for that date, can we move it?
That's usually best practice. I mean, we do have the head of each service available, and we have, I think we just last week moved one because we couldn't get an officer. We were also going to move this evening's one on the empty homes because the officer was unavailable, but kindly Matt stepped in at the last minute for us, so we do try and get the relevant officers along.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Just a question for Liz. I noticed the list of the committee site visits along the bottom. I noticed right at Lido's on that list. Given that most of the problems or issues that we've heard about, I'm saying this on behalf of Councillor Smallwood, is during the summer. Can we get that scheduled in during the summer when it's going to be a major impact? Please, thank you.
Yep, we can certainly look at that if Chair's agreeable.
Yes, I mean we just prioritise on the first come first served. We get availability, we schedule it, but we can certainly push for certain ones if the committee has a preference for what they want to do. Yes, certainly.
Given that it's seasonal,
We're not going to do the gritters in the summer, so we might as well do that, aren't we? Okay.
Just on the topic of site visits, if I may, Chair, just briefly. We have a site visit on the 25th of June, which is the one to the Heathrow Academy. I just wanted, if members can sort of let me know if you're able to go, because Danielle has contacted me for some clarification on numbers, and at the moment I don't actually know for sure who's going to be there.
Should be a good visit. Councillor Davis, myself, anyone else? I mean, we could certainly...
Councillor Fire, I don't know if you could just let me know at some point as well. Yep. Okay, thank you.
What we've also done as best practice previously, if we are low on numbers, we will certainly reach out on either side of the political parties to other councillors who aren't necessarily on this committee, but if they're new councillors, they may wish to go along as an experience just to gain an insight into how they work. But if we are low on numbers, we can certainly make them up. But I look forward to joining you all then. Okay, that's all our business for this evening. Thank you for your attendance, and I declare the meeting closed at 26 minutes past 9. Thank you very much, and good night.